Hello friends, in today's class we're going to design this book model and you can see its render on the screen. So without wasting any time, let's jump into today's class. First, I will import a reference image, but if I import the reference image while staying in the perspective view, I'll have to adjust its settings like rotation and position later on. So I will first switch to the top view. And once I'm in a top view, I'll drag and drop the reference image into Blender. This way the reference image will be imported. Now I will press Shift S and move the selection to the cursor, which means the reference image will move to the world's origin since our 3D cursor is already at the world's origin. Look, if I switch to the perspective view, the reference image doesn't show up. So if you want the image to be visible in the perspective view as well, you need to go into the image data settings and then check the perspective option. Once you do that, you will see that the reference image will be visible in both the orthographic and the perspective views. After that, I'll switch to the top view, select the cube, enter edit mode, enable the X-ray mode, and adjust the cube according to the size of the book. Now that we've adjusted this side, I'll adjust it for the book's width as well. For that, I'll rotate the book 90 degrees on the x-axis, and then I'll select the cube and scale it down on the z-axis so that it matches the book's width. Now I'll bring the book model to the world's origin. To do that, I'll first select it, right-click, and choose Set Origin, and then Origin to Geometry. After that, I'll press Shift S and select Selection to Cursor, which will place the model exactly at the world's origin. Now I'll go into Edit mode, switch to Face Select mode, and press the A key to select all the faces. After that, I'll right-click and choose Subdivide, and in the subdivision options, I'll set the number of cuts to 3. Then I'll create an edge loop and select both of these edge loops, scaling them up along the z-axis. Now you'll see that if I add a subdivision surface modifier, actually I won't do that just yet. First, I'll select these faces, and after selecting them, I'll press Alt-E and choose Extrude Faces along normals to extrude them inward. However, you might notice that the thickness of the extrusion is not even. In some areas, the extrusion is deeper, while in others it's shallower. To ensure even thickness, I'll press the S key, and when I do that, you'll see that the thickness becomes uniform on all sides. After extruding, I'll press the P key to separate this part, and now you'll notice that it's become a separate object, which I'll go ahead and hide for now. So as you can see, if I add a subdivision surface modifier right now, the geometry doesn't appear the way I want it to. That's why I'll delete the subdivision surface modifier for now. Then I'll go into edit mode, enable X-ray mode, and delete these faces as well as the bottom face. Now I'm left with just this part. On this remaining part, I'll add a mirror modifier. And I'll enable the z-axis as well as the x-axis in the mirror settings. I'll also make sure that the clipping and merge options are enabled. Now I'll switch to vertex select mode, select these two vertices, and then select the last vertex. I'll press the M key to merge them, and choose at last so that all 3 vertices merge at this point. I'll repeat this process for the other vertices as well. Now, when I add the subdivision surface modifier again, you'll see that the shape turns out exactly as I want it. The reason I added the mirror modifier is so that I don't have to merge the vertices on each side separately. By merging them on one side, the corresponding vertices on the other side get merged automatically. Now I'll create an edge loop here and another edge loop over here, and then I'll add one more edge loop in this spot. You'll notice that the shape is coming together quite nicely, and I'll go ahead and right-click to set the shading to smooth. Now I'll unhide the part that I had hidden earlier to check if it looks fine, and it does. At this point, the modeling is almost complete. Now I'll proceed to unwrap the book cover, but before that I'll add a material to this object. To do this, I'll open the shader editor, press Shift-A to add a new node, search for an image texture, and connect it to the base color. Next, I'll enable Material Preview mode, and in the Image Texture node, I'll click on New and select a UV grid. Then confirm by clicking OK. You'll now see that the UV grid texture is applied to the book. We often use this UV grid texture to check if the object is unwrapped properly or not. So now you can see that in many areas, the UVs appear stretched, and also these black and white boxes are not forming perfect squares. Your UVs will only be considered good when these black and white boxes are perfectly square. So what I'll do now is open the side window and launch the UV editor there. Now I'll go into edit mode, but before that I'll apply the mirror modifier. Now when I go into edit mode and press the A key, it will select all of the geometry. Then I'll press the U key to unwrap it. Now you'll notice that the unwrapping is done and those black and white boxes have turned into perfect squares. However, there are still a few areas where there are issues. For example, you can see that in certain spots, the UVs appear stretched. So I'll switch to Edge Select mode, select those edges, and as you can see, it's clear where the stretching is happening. I'll select these edges, right-click and choose Mark Seam. Then once again, I'll press A to select everything in edit mode and press U to unwrap it again. To straighten the UV island more effectively, I'll use an add-on called UV Squares. You can download UV Squares from this website and I'll include the link in the description so you can install the add-on easily. Now you'll see that once I select the UV island and click on to grid by shape, the UVs are neatly aligned. Next, I'll select the actual book cover image in the image editor, and I'll also make sure to select that same book cover image in the material. This way, as I adjust the UVs in real time, I can immediately see the results on the object. Now I will rotate the UV island by 90 degrees, and then I'll scale it so that it fits properly according to the book. I think now the UV for the cover is perfectly aligned with the texture. Next, for the part of the book that represents the pages, which currently has the same material, I'll remove that material and add a new one specifically for the pages. I'll also unwrap that part as well. But before I do that, I'll import the texture that I'm going to apply, connect it to the material, and then select that same texture in the image editor for the UV section. After that, I'll mark seams along the necessary edges, then press A to select everything in edit mode, press U to unwrap it, and finally I'll adjust that part so that it matches the texture perfectly. So now the unwrapping part is also finished. Next, we'll move on to some material settings and we'll make a few changes to the texture as well. We'll create a roughness map and a normal map from the same texture. As you can see right now, the material for the book cover only has one image texture, but we'll also generate a roughness map and a normal map from it. First, I'll select the image texture node in the shader editor and press Ctrl T, which will add the texture coordinates automatically. Then, to create the roughness map, I'll press Shift-A to add a color ramp node, and I'll connect the color output of the texture to the factor input of the color ramp. To see the result of this adjustment, I'll temporarily connect the output of the color ramp to the material output. In a roughness map, we typically have only black and white colors. The black areas represent shininess, while the white areas represent roughness. In other words, the black parts will appear shiny, and the white parts will look more matte and rough. Since I want the golden areas of my texture to be shiny, and the rest of the texture to be rough, I'm going to invert the output by swapping the sides of the color ramp you'll notice that the golden areas now appear shiny and the rest of the texture appears rough. However, it's also important to know that whenever we use a texture for roughness, metalness, or a normal map, we should set the color space to non-color. I'll go ahead and set it to non-color, but doing so might affect the overall appearance of the texture. To compensate for this, we can add a gamma node and set its value to about 2.3, though that might be a bit too high. I'll lower it to 2, which will help us get closer to the original color of the texture. Now, if the shiny areas appear too shiny, I can further fine-tune the color ramp to get just the right balance of roughness and shine for the golden areas. Now I'm going to create the normal map as well. To do that, I'll start by duplicating the same color ramp by pressing Shift-D, and then I'll connect this duplicated node accordingly. After that, I'll press Shift-A and add a bump node. I'll connect the color output from the color ramp to the height input of the bump node, and then I'll connect the normal output of the bump node to the normal input of the material. Now you'll notice that the strength is quite high, so I'll adjust the strength value to get it just right for the effect I want. You'll see that this gives a really nice result. Now for the pages section, I'll also generate a normal map. We don't really need a roughness map here. We can simply adjust the roughness value directly. To start, I'll select the image texture and press Ctrl-T to add the texture coordinates. Then I'll add a color ramp node and connect the factor input of the color ramp to the color output of the texture. I'll temporarily connect the color output of the color ramp directly to the material output so that I can easily see its effect. In this setup, the black areas will represent lower height and the white areas will represent higher elevation, just as you would expect with a height map. Black areas appear recessed and white areas appear raised. Now I'll adjust the values on the color ramp until I feel they look just right. Once I'm satisfied, I'll reconnect the output of the principled BSCF back to the material output. Then I'll add a bump node, and I'll connect the color output of the color ramp to the height input of the bump node, and then connect the normal output of the bump node to the normal input of the material. If the strength is too high, I'll lower it to a more suitable level so that it looks just right. Now that the material settings are complete, I can close the shader editor since I won't need it for now. I'll now move on to setting up the lighting and rendering for the scene. First, I'll press Shift-A to create a plane, and then I'll scale it up while in edit mode. Next, I'll select one of the edges and extrude it along the Z-axis to create a background wall. After that, I'll select the edge and press Ctrl-B to bevel it, making the corner smoother. I'll do a bit more fine-tuning to ensure everything looks right. Then I can press 0 on the numpad to switch to the camera view. I can select the edge loop and move it slightly along the Y-axis to ensure that the background completely covers the view from the camera's perspective. I'll select both parts of the book and move them slightly upward along the Z-axis. Then I'll press Shift-D to duplicate them and move the duplicates up a bit, rotating them slightly along the Z-axis to create a more dynamic arrangement. Next, I'll press Shift-A, go to the light section, and add an area light. I'll adjust its position and scale it up slightly. Then, I'll switch to the render preview so I can see how the lighting affects the scene. In the render engine settings, I'll select cycles for more realistic lighting. After that, I'll select the light and increase its power until it looks just right. Then, I'll change the pivot point to the 3D cursor and duplicate the light, rotating it along the Y-axis to place additional copies around the scene. By duplicating and rotating the lights, I can ensure the book is evenly lit from different angles. Once I'm happy with the lighting, I'll add a material to the plane underneath the book and adjust its color to be a bit darker, creating a nice contrast. Finally, I'll select the camera, move it slightly forward to get the best angle, adjust any final scene details, and then go to the render menu and render the image. I hope everything we covered in today's class made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. I'll see you in next class. Until then, goodbye.